welcome to our Tuesday evening webinar. This week what we have for you is Atmosphere Resorts in the Philippines. They are on the island of Dumaguete and they dive the Dauin area and also Apo Island. Atmosphere Resorts is a beautiful luxury resort. We were just discussing before you guys came in. They have, for anyone that's into wines, their wine room is absolutely fabulous and their spa is incredible too, as well as fantastic diving. They also do a lot of wellness activities and yoga and things like that. So it's a really lovely combination for those looking to get away, to focus on themselves, as well as incredible diving. But we have a very special guest here today because today we have Kirsty, and she is a marine biologist at Atmosphere. So I'm sure she's probably going to talk a little bit about the resort, but our main focus here is about the critters and the amazing animals that are under the water waiting for you where Atmosphere is. For anyone that has questions, if you haven't been here before, you can type them in the chat box. There's also a Q&A. Either way, we will try and answer you if it's a small question, or we will let you know that we're going to answer it at the end. And then at the end of the webinar, we will open things up for you to speak directly to Kirsty and ask your questions to her. So without further ado, here's Kirsty.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the introduction, Cheryl. So my name's Kirsty, as Cheryl mentioned. I've been the marine biologist here at Atmosphere for coming up 2 years. So my day entails a lot of diving out on the reef around Apo and along the coast, as well as doing some teaching of scuba diving to lots of our guests that come up and along. So I've got two presentations that we're going to essentially merge into one. The first covers Apo Island, a bit about the history of the island and the creation of the marine park, as well as some of the marine life that we might see if you were diving or snorkeling. And then we're going to loop straight back into the critters of Dauin. So the more macro-themed presentation focused on the weird and wonderful species that we get along the coastal areas. So I'll look forward to your questions at the end. So to jump straight in, Apo Island is about 14 kilometers off the coast here of Dumaguete. If you go down to the beach, you can see it just off on the horizon. If we jump to the first slide, many years ago, there was a lot of destructive fishing happening around the island. The end of World War II had a lot of ammunition left over. Locals used to use that to create their own dynamite bombs. So you put some ammunition in a bottle, you throw it in the reef, it goes boom, it stuns or kills a lot of the fish. We then had the Japanese that brought in a type of fishing called mirror army fishing, which is a way of placing a large net over the reef. You would then duck dive down onto the reef, bang on the structure with rocks, you scare or you stun the fish up and off the reef and into the net. And then we had the aquarium trade come through the area. And they fished a lot with cyanide. So you'd squirt the cyanide essentially onto the reef in front of the fish. Again, it stuns, but it can occasionally kill the fish as well. So regulations for this type of destructive fishing came in around the 1980s. But if you can imagine, the Philippines is a fairly poor country spread across several thousand islands. So the lack of enforcement wasn't exactly at the level that you would hope it to be at. If we jump forwards a little while, this gentleman in the top left-hand corner came into play. His name is Dr. Alcala, and he used to work at Similon University here in Dumaguete. He was doing a lot of work with locals on small islands that utilize a lot of their fishing resources to feed their families and to make an income. And he got talking with the locals on Apo Island in terms of how they can best preserve those resources. And in the early 1980s, around 1982, the first marine sanctuary was established around Apo Island. If you can see the little map on the bottom left-hand corner there, the sanctuary was on the southeast corner of the island. It was 450 meters along and 500 meters out into the ocean. And this was only really started up because some of the locals thought it was a good idea. Around about 14 families were backing it for it to come into play. And the only reason it really got pushed forwards is because one of the members of those families happened to be the chief or the leader of the island. He thought it was a good idea, so it got pushed through, and that area was then closed to all extractive activities. So you can't take anything out of that area. It then took a few years for the entirety of the island population to get behind it, and it became official in 1985. So since then, it has been the Philippines' longest continuously running marine park. And the locals at first established a marine management committee. So there were certain members of the island population that would oversee that sanctuary, make sure nothing untoward is happening in that area. When we talk about marine conservation a lot of marine protected areas and marine sanctuaries and marine reserves are known as paper parks, unfortunately. And that essentially means that they were put in place by people that sit in air-conditioned offices behind desks. They sign their pieces of paper to create some sort of marine conservation area. But if you went down to that location, there's no infrastructure, there's no enforcement to make sure that that is actually happening. Apo Island Marine Sanctuary is a great example of a bottom-up creation of a marine park, really emphasizing that it was created and is supported by the local community. They're invested in it, they feel ownership of it, and therefore it seems it has a lot more chance of success in the area. When we talk about marine protection in general, we typically get what we call the spillover effect. So if we shut off a certain area to extractive activities, the marine life in that area continues to do whatever it is that it does. It eats, it grows, it reproduces, it increases in number until that area reaches its carrying capacity. And by that, I mean there is so much marine life in that area that it warrants them swimming off into other areas to create more space, create more habitat. They then swim over the boundary line of the marine protected area. They obviously have no idea where it is. The fishermen sit on the other side of that boundary line and they reap the rewards of this spillover effect. When we go to Apo Island now, whether we're snorkeling or diving, we all pay marine fees. Around 75% of that goes to the island itself, and that has helped them over the years make a number of improvements to the island. In terms of, they have a great big nice new chapel on the island. They also have better sanitation and desalination areas. If we jump forwards again, this named Dr. Alcala, he came back into play and he found himself as the head of the Department for the Environment for Natural Resources in the Philippines. And he actually utilized the model that he used to create the Apo Island Marine Park to go ahead and create several more small marine parks across the Philippines. Nowadays, Apo Island is actually managed nationally. It's part of the National Marine Sanctuary Program that is all managed up in Manila, rather than being managed locally here in Dauin and Dumaguete. If we look at marine protection across the Philippines in general, latest numbers that I can find gives it around 1,500 marine protected areas, but only around 300 of those are actually managed nationally and registered nationally. The vast majority, so 90% of them are no-take, which is great, meaning you can't fish or take any resources from that area, but also 90% of them are less than 1 kilometre squared, meaning we have a lot of very small marine parks. If we look back in terms of how marine protected areas have been working around the globe in the last few decades, it's been pushed forwards that a great way is to have a combination of these small marine parks, but also much larger areas put closed off to fishing, especially in the high seas and off the coast. If we look on the map on the right-hand side, the green areas, especially down there at the bottom there, they are mangroves. The pink areas are your coral reefs, and then your red and your orange areas are some form of protection. And the big ones that you can see there, so down near the border with Malaysia in the bottom left-hand corner, that is Turtle Islands Marine Park. And as far as I know, it's the only trans-boundary marine protected area in Southeast Asia. So it sits across the border with Malaysia and the Philippines. That area, as you might have guessed by its name, is one of the biggest green turtle nesting areas in Southeast Asia as well. If we go slightly further north, just above where it says Sulu Sea, that triangular orange area is Tupataha. a very famous area for diving and has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site for many years. But then, as you can see, it's a lot of very small coastal protected areas around the islands. If we go now towards life under the ocean, so coral reefs in general, they cover a very small percentage of the ocean's floor. So only 0.1% of the ocean's floor is covered by coral reefs, yet they can be home to up to 25% of all marine life. So by that, I mean 25% of everything that lives in the ocean will spend some part of its life on or in the habitat of a coral reef. So be everything from small fish that live their whole lives there to maybe more larger pelagic fish that spend their juvenile years when they are much smaller and more vulnerable in amongst the safety of the reef structure until they reach a decent size and then they head out into the blue. In terms of coral species, around the Philippines as a whole, you can roughly get about 480 different species of coral, depending on how good your identification skills are. And on any given dive around Apo, you can probably get around 400 species of coral. To put that in some context, if you were diving in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean, you may roughly get anywhere between 60 to 90 species of coral. So this particular area and Southeast Asia as a whole is incredibly biodiverse. When we talk about coral, it can be incredibly difficult to identify it down to species. And even people that are studying coral or have been studying coral for many, many years, when it comes to identifying certain species, you might even have to put a sample under a microscope to be able to look at the minute details and the differences. So we like to keep things a little simpler, and we generally talk more about growth form than we do about species of coral. We have several different growth forms that we can see in this area. The most common one is the branching coral up in the top right there. These ones particularly grow quite quickly. Over a given year, if the conditions are right, they can grow anywhere from 20 to 30 centimeters a year. So incredibly fast growing in terms of corals. The massive corals, the big coral bommies, the big brain corals, these guys are much slower growing, maybe only a few millimeters every year. We also get lots of free living corals, so the little guy in the middle at the bottom there. These are also known as mushroom corals, and they are not physically attached to anything. They're free living, so if big typhoons, big currents and storms come in, they will be moved around the reef. Hopefully they'll then settle somewhere and they can go on feeding. What is also interesting with a lot of corals is even if you have one species, it can look and grow incredibly different depending on whereabouts it's growing and the environmental conditions it's growing in. You could take one species and let it grow in a very sheltered, shallow tropical lagoon. It will look and grow one way. If you put that species on a very exposed wall with fast moving currents, it will look and grow completely different. So it can be tricky. If we go even further into coral, just for a moment, coral, hopefully you all know, is an animal. It's not a plant or a pretty stone or a rock. But the actual animal part is the very tiny coral polyp. And thousands of these polyps all sit next to each other in a colony to make the big coral structures that we see when we're diving on a reef. If you imagine the polyp as essentially an upside down jellyfish, the polyp sits within the structure of the reef, and the actual polyp has a very unique relationship with some algae called zooxanthellae. The algae lives within the polyp and does what algae does, it photosynthesizes. That then produces a vast amount of energy that is given to the polyp itself. When the sun then goes down, obviously the algae can't photosynthesize, so the polyp will stick out its tentacles, it will whack them in the water column, and it is then trying to attract very small bits of phytoplankton, zooplankton, that it brings in, it digests, and that tops up its energy requirements to 100%. If we move on to fish, so again, it's incredibly biodiverse in terms of fish species. Depending on your identification skills, you can probably get around 650 different species of fish seen at Apo. And we tend to get different species at Apo than we do along the coast of Dauin, even though we're not that far away. And that's generally because the habitat types are very different. At Apo, it is white sand. It drops off fairly steeply compared with the coast, and we get a lot of strong currents shooting past the island. Versus here along the coast of Dauin, it's very gently sloping beaches down into the depths. The sand is quite dark because we are volcanic, and the currents are a lot less strong along this area. So some of the marine life that you can see whether you're diving at Apo or occasionally along the coast, it's very easy to see at least 7 different species of anemonefish or clownfish along the coast. And these guys are some of my favorites. They are hermaphrodites. They go from being male to being female over the course of their life, if they're lucky. If you sit and watch one anemone, you will generally find several anemonefish swimming in and around that area. The largest fish that you will see will be the female, and it's her job to nag and pester and stress out all the other males that are in her anemone. When she dies or is eaten or leaves, the next biggest fish will have nobody pestering and stressing him out on a daily basis. So he will change from male to female, and then he will start stressing out all the other males in that anemone to make sure that their female hormones are repressed. That mating pair, so the largest fish, the female, and the second largest, the higher ranking male, are the only same pair that will be breeding in the anemone. And if you do happen to see eggs, if you just sit and watch them, it's a male that would be fanning the eggs, making sure oxygen and water is being moved across them so they develop very, very quickly. Another small colourful fish that we see plenty of at Apo are Anthias. So these guys are a couple of inches long, very, very colourful, from oranges to blues to purples to greens. And these guys do things slightly differently. So you might look at this picture and think it's one large school, but actually these guys are involved in lots of small harems, all swimming around together. And this time it's the male that is the leader, the boss, and he is constantly maintaining his females, his juveniles, from all the other small harems swimming around him. They are also a good fish to have a look at if you want to know if there is a current and which way the current might be going. They will generally be sitting just above the reef, and if there is a current, they'll be facing into it and they'll be swimming, but they won't be going anywhere. They are just trying to maintain their position on the reef. Another common critter that we find at Apo is the black-banded sea krait. So all sea kraits are technically sea snakes, but not all sea snakes are sea kraits. Some of the differences, if you look on the second half of his body, his tail is a bit more flattened, a bit more paddle-like to help with him swimming through the water. Also, sea kraits will spend just as much time underwater as they will do on land, whereas a true sea snake will spend their entire lives underwater. This guy is slightly venomous, so a bite from him is about 20 times worse than a bite from a cobra, so not something you want to get too close to. We do find that they are incredibly curious and will often approach divers. What we believe they might be doing, especially when we're hanging out on our safety stop, is coming up to us, hoping our big gangly arms and our big finned feet will scare something up and away from the reef that they can then go shooting after. But they are not known to be aggressive. I think one of the only couple of cases that have proven a fatality with this guy is somebody very remote northern Australia, when they've been pulling in fishing nets. Unfortunately, there's been a snake caught in the net, and it just happened to get him on the hand. If you can't get to hospital very, very quickly, it could go quite badly wrong. But in general, they're very, very inquisitive and not at all aggressive. Something that us divers are a little more terrified of are Titan triggerfish. So these guys are a big bony fish. They can get this kind of size, and they are some of the only biggest fish that will nest demersally. So by that I mean a mating pair will blow a little pit in the sand, they'll lay their eggs in that pit, and then they will defend that area to the best of their ability. So if anybody's been in the ocean with some of these guys when they are defending nests, you will know they can be incredibly aggressive. They have no qualms, shooting right up to you very, very quickly, will take bites out of fins, bites out of whatever they can get hold of. So especially here at Atmosphere, you'll find a lot of our dive instructors and our dive guides will be watching these when we see them. And if we can do, we will do a great big loop around them and give them their space. One of its friendlier cousins is the clown triggerfish, one of my personal favorites. This guy is a lot more friendlier, a lot smaller, more rugby ball shaped or football ball shaped for the Americans. And this is a species that I used to use as an example that we tend to see at Apo, but we don't generally see along the coast of Dauin. However, they must have heard me say that because we did have one of these guys sitting on our house reef for several months. So it's not always true. Another sight to be seen at Apo are our schools of big-eyed trevally, or jacks as they're more commonly known. There's a couple of sites that you can dive on the northern end of the island where we get quite strong currents. If you jump in, you strike your Superman pose, you drift off with the current, and if you're lucky and you hit the reef just at the right depth, you could see hundreds or thousands of these big-eyed trevally all schooling together in a massive whirlpool. A very, very cool sight to see. But Apo is very much famous for its green turtles. We never guarantee the fact that you could see turtles when you come to Apo. You would just be very unlucky if you went to Apo Island and you didn't see any. We get 2 different species. I would say if you saw 10 turtles at Apo, maybe 8 of them will be greens. The other 2 will be hawksbills. The greens come, they like to have a scratch and to be cleaned. The hawksbills, we tend to see slightly deeper on the reef. So these guys are generally out for feeding. They use that big, strong hawk-like bill to crunch through the coral, to crunch through crustaceans, things with a hard shell. And quite often you will see these, they've got their head in the reef and they are blissfully unaware that 4 divers have just gone straight past them. A couple of ways to tell them apart. So they are marine reptiles, but they have scutes rather than scales. If you look in between the eyes on a green or a hawksbill turtle, it will be a hawksbill if you see 2 pairs of scutes in between the eyes, and it will be a green if you just see 1 pair in between here. If you look on their carapace, or that hard shell on their back, they both have a line of scutes that go down the middle, and they do both have 4 pairs of scutes either side of that. But for a hawksbill, the scutes will overlap quite significantly, whereas for a green turtle, they sit side by side quite nicely. Another inkling you can get if you've got a hawksbill that you can't really see on this diagram is if you go around the edge of the carapace, it's quite jagged if it's a hawksbill, but also just having a good old look at them. The green turtle's a bit chunkier, a bit heavier set face, more mottledy brown and green in colour, whereas the hawksbill is slightly daintier head, that distinctive bill, and the coloration is a little bit more yellowy. We mentioned I like to come to Apo for a couple of reasons. There are a few sites around the island we know as cleaning stations. The turtles, especially the green turtles, will plonk themselves on the reef. They will sit there and chill out while small fish come around and clean all the detritus and the algae off their shells. So we do have very beautiful turtles at Apo, but they also like to come for a good old scratch. And lots of guests say that they have seen turtles and they almost look like they're stuck in the reef. And part of you is saying, I want to go and help them and pull them out. But if you just stop and sit and watch them for a little while, you'll see them slowly start to shake their butts from side to side. And essentially all they're doing is having a good old scratch on the reef system. This particular image was taken from a very popular scratching post. You can see they've worn out a ring from the reef around the edge. And as soon as one turtle moved off, the other turtle was raring and ready to come and take its place on that particular post. Coming towards the end, so here at Atmosphere, we have teamed up with La Mave, who are a local non-governmental organisation. They have been in the area for a while and are doing a lot of work on identifying individual turtles around Apo. Many years ago, turtle conservation work used to involve only interacting with nesting females on beaches, where we would put a small identification tag in the back half of the flipper. Nowadays, so many of us have some form of camera in our hands, whether we're snorkeling or diving, And we have found that the images of the side of the face, those individual scutes, are essentially like a thumbprint. They're a unique pattern for each individual turtle. So we've been asking some of our guests to become citizen scientists, and if they get images of the left side of a turtle's face, we can put them into our database, and we're slowly gathering images of individual turtles around Apo, but also turtles along the coast here. What we're looking at is, are the turtles going over to Apo for a scratch and a clean, and then coming over to Dauin for a munch and or seagrass beds? Who knows? And then lastly, what we would tell the guests if you weren't here is that Apo has done great things in terms of trying to protect the marine life around the island. But unfortunately, a marine sanctuary doesn't stop the pollution coming in with the tides and the currents. So we always like our guests to be safe first, but if they happen to come past some pollution, be it a plastic bag or a piece of rubbish, we're very, very grateful to them if they bring that back to the boat and we can dispose of it properly. Okay, so that is the end of the Apo talk. Let me just have a sip of coffee. And we will dive straight into the critters of Dauin. So this is one of our other presentations that we do several nights a week here at Apo, Atmosphere, sorry. And the critters that we find along the coast are getting more and more famous as muck diving in general becomes a lot more popular. So here we'll just go over a little bit about muck diving in general, for those of you that may not have ventured into that yet. And then we look at some of my favorites, some of our guest favorites, critters that can be found along the coast. And we by no means go into everything, otherwise we would be here for a long, long time. So to start off, muck diving is essentially when you jump off the boat, you pop your head underwater and all you can see is maybe sand or muck. And your first thought is, why on earth have the dive guides brought me to this place? There's obviously nothing to see. But over the last few years, we now know that there is a lot of biodiversity in these areas. You've just got to look a bit harder for it. So it's almost like a treasure hunt. Some research that has been done in the last couple of years has found that muck diving brings around $150 million to Indonesia and Philippines every year. So it's a very growing industry, and it brings around 100,000 divers to the area purely to muck dive. So these guys aren't particularly bothered about the beautiful reefs, they're here for the hardcore muck diving. We mentioned just a moment ago that a lot more of us have a camera, and around 74% of all divers coming into the ocean now have some form of camera in their hands. So anything from a cheap knockoff GoPro to your big several $1,000 setups that a lot of people have. Research was done to look at what people actually want to see when they're muck diving, what are the critters that really tick the boxes, and the top three. First place, there was joint, the mimic and the wonderpus octopus. Second place was the blue-ringed octopus, and third place were rhinopias. So things like weedy, paddleflap and lacy scorpionfish were all on the list. What is unique about a lot of these animals is that we don't know much about them. We can generally take you to see them, we can tell you what they are and identify them when we do see them, but in terms of their biology, their ecology, their distribution, their life histories, we really don't know much. And because we know so little, it's very difficult to establish their extinction risk in terms of whether populations are increasing or decreasing. When it comes to us divers and muck diving, it's been shown that we are a lot less careful over sand. When we're diving over beautiful reefs like at Apo, it's pretty much ingrained into us that we shouldn't be touching anything. We should watch our buoyancy, make sure our fins aren't kicking anything. But when we're diving over soft sediment, we are a lot less careful. And we know now that there's a huge biodiversity living in that sediment. Research has shown that the first 20 minutes of any dive is particularly crucial in terms of our buoyancy, especially if we haven't been in the water for very long. If we're going to make contact with the bottom or the substrate, that's generally when it's going to happen. And unfortunately, us underwater photographers are the worst. 74% of somebody with a camera in their hands is going to make contact with the reef be it very carefully and one finger on a rock to just planting your whole self on the bottom of the benthos. It has been shown that a good pre-dive environmental briefing, just jogging our memories of what we should and shouldn't be doing underwater, is very beneficial, as well as our friendly dive master coming over and just politely reminding us that we should be a little bit higher up in the water column. So here at Atmosphere, we have recently, in the last 6 months or so, launched our own PADI specialty. We wrote the critters specialty about 6 months ago, which focuses very much on the critters and the marine life that we find along the coast of Dauin. So we spend a large amount of time in the classroom learning what we do know, and then we challenge our guests to go out and essentially become the dive masters themselves and see if they can find a number of different critter species across a couple of dives. So this is, at the moment, is only available at Atmosphere. At the moment, I'm the only person that can teach it to you. So this is just a little sample of what you might get on that particular course. So the first critter that we're going to jump towards is the mantis shrimp. Mantis shrimp come in a couple of different types. We have spearers and we have smashers. This guy in the picture is a smashing mantis shrimp, and they have one of the fastest punches in the animal kingdom. They can deliver a blow which gives about 200 pounds of force. So incredibly strong little critter that's only maybe a few inches long. These guys live in small burrows on the reef, and the smashers you will typically see charging around the reef looking for crabs and crustaceans, things with a hard shell that they will use that incredibly strong punch to get through, and then they'll eat the soft-bodied animal inside. The others are the spearers. And these guys are ambush predators. So they will sit in their burrow, very, very still, waiting for that opportune moment when a small-bodied fish or something soft swims past the burrow at just the right distance, and they fling out this long spear and essentially spear their dinner and bring it back down into the burrow. But they also have incredible eyesight. So mantis shrimp have these two googly eyes that sit up on stalks. They can move them almost 360 degrees. They can move them independently of each other. And whereas we have binocular vision, we have one pupil in each eye, mantis shrimp have hexnocular vision. So they have 3 pupils in each eye. Whereas we also have only 3 photoreceptor cells. We have red, blue, and green. They have well over 12 photoreceptor cells. So they can see technicolor, they can see polarized light. And because of this incredible vision, scientists have reverse engineered their eyesight and have been using these cameras in cancer studies. Because mantis shrimp can detect polarized light, they found that polarized light will be reflected differently with cancer tissue versus healthy tissue. So incredible research as well. Moving on to nudibranchs. So nudibranchs are gastropod mollusks, essentially related to your common garden snail, but a little bit prettier. And the name nudibranch breaks down into naked and gills. So one way we can tell them apart from other marine worms, other flatworms out on the reef, are the presence of these little tufty gills on the back end of their body. For the guy in the picture, if you look between the horns, just out of focus are the naked gills. There are well over 3,000 species, and there's definitely a lot more species out in the ocean that we are yet to identify. These little horns on the front are actually known as rhinophores, and they are incredibly sensitive sensory organs. So one of the ways these guys can detect pheromones, hormones in the water column to find prey, but also to find other nudibranchs. One of some of those nudibranchs specialties is that some of them will consume things with stinging cells, or nematosis as they're called. So things like coral polyps and anemone tentacles, they will consume that, but rather than digesting those stinging cells, they will push them up into the surface of their skin, and they're essentially stealing the ability to sting from the prey that they've just eaten to then use in their own defense mechanisms. These are just a few of the images from nudibranchs that we get along the coast. As we say, we've got hundreds of different species. The Flabellina in the middle there and the Yamasui on the bottom right are examples of these nudibranch species that will utilize that essential stealing of stinging cells to push up into the surface of their skin. We are still learning a lot about nudibranchs. This series of pictures was from a paper that came out almost 18 months ago now, October 2018, and it brought at least 17 new species of nudibranch to science. And what they started to realize was just because two species of nudibranch looked similar didn't necessarily mean that they were closely related. They could look similar because they are living in the same area, they're eating similar amounts of prey, but if you look genetically back on the tree of life, they were actually quite separately distant relatives of each other. One of the nudibranch's relatives are the sapsucking slugs, and these guys are incredibly small. So when you're out muck diving and the dive guide points to a little bit of fluff on a leaf and you can't quite make out what it is, this is probably what they're pointing at, maxing out maybe kind of 3 to 5 millimeters, so incredibly tiny. These guys will live their whole lives on a little piece of algae about this big, and their party trick is that they will eat the leaf, they will consume the chloroplast cells from the leaf, and again, rather than digesting them, they push them up into the surface of their skin, and they're essentially stealing the ability to photosynthesize from the plant itself, so they can produce their own energy. One reason why these guys are also nicknamed as the solar-powered slug, also nicknamed as the Shaun the Sheep slug for his resemblance to the little cartoon character, which is very cute. To give you an idea of size, this is a picture of one of the leaves. If you can see it, there are 2 individual sap-sucking slugs on this leaf. If you imagine the leaf face as a clock, one of them is at about 10 p.m. The other is maybe coming up to about 8:45. So incredibly small little creatures. We are lucky enough to get plenty of seahorses along the coast here in Dauin. All seahorses are placed on CITES Appendix 2. So without going into too much complicated detail, it essentially means that they can be moved around the world. But if you want to move a seahorse from one place to another, there is a lot of paperwork, a lot of permits and passes that you need to get in place before you can do that legally. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop a lot of seahorses being traded every year. Around 15 to 20 million are moved around illegally. The majority are dried out for either ornamental value or to then be ground down and used in traditional medicines. A recent report updated numbers of illegally traded seahorses in the Philippines and estimated it around 1.7 million tons annually. The photo on the right-hand side is a collection of dried seahorses that was caught in Cebu airport, not too far from here, and it was just over 15 kilograms of seahorses that were about to be exported. This particular species is the thorny seahorse, fairly common along the coast here, and you can tell it gets its thorny name from these spines that stick out along the length of its body. All seahorses sit within the same family, which essentially means that their jaws are fused together. They are unable to open and close their jaw. Instead, they use this sucking action to suck small shrimp and very small invertebrates into the mouth and down into the body. Another one of our popular seahorses that we have in the area is the pygmy seahorse. These guys were only discovered in 1969 and purely by accident. So they are probably maxing out about 1 centimetre, a few millimetres tall, and they live their whole lives on Gorgonian sea fans. And some scientists were studying the Gorgonian sea fans. They took the sea fan out of the ocean and put it into a laboratory environment. And they very slowly started to notice these tiny little seahorses moving around on the sea fan. They are masters of camouflage. So this particular species, these kind of reddy, warty tubercles around the body are mimicking the polyps of the sea fan. And this slightly paler body is mimicking the stalks of the sea fan. So they can change colour, but rather than instantaneously, it takes them a period of time to be able to blend in with their background. Related to our seahorses are our ghost pipefish. They are technically not pipefish, as they do have too many fins to be a true cylindrical pipefish. And it's quite up for discussion in terms of how many different species there are. It's thought there are officially 6, but that could very well grow in the near future. They again are masters of camouflage. Each species seems to have its own niche or its own area of camouflage. The 3 most popular ones that we get in this area, the Halimeda ghost pipefish on the left there is very much camouflaged into a certain type of algae, known as the Halimeda algae. You find the algae, hopefully you'll find the seahorse. The ornate ghost pipefish in the middle is very much at home within the tentacles and the fronds of feather stars or crinoids. We quite often see them reds and blacks, blues and yellows, and just sitting above the feather star and camouflage into it incredibly well. We then also have the robust ghost pipefish. These guys like to imitate dead bits of vegetation, bits of seagrass, and quite often you can look across a seagrass bed. If you see something moving slightly differently to the blades of seagrass, maybe you've got a robust ghost pipefish on your hands. Even though they are closely related to seahorses, it's actually the female that carries the eggs. So we have reverted back from the male seahorse to the female. And what we still don't know about these guys is whether they do have some form of hermaphrodism, whether they can turn from male to female over the course of their lifetime. Very famous in this area are our frogfish. It draws a lot of people in to muck diving. All frogfish are classed as angular fish. It just kind of depends where you are in the world as to whether frogfish are known as separately or under the umbrella of anglerfish. And they are well known for having this rod and this lure. So this elysium, or like a fishing rod that comes out from their first dorsal spine, kind of just between their eyes. And each rod has a lure on the end. And this is their form of aggressive mimicry. So each species will have a lure on the end of that rod that is unique to that species. And mainly because each species is trying to attract a slightly different type of prey. So they will sit very, very still on the reef using their incredible camouflaging abilities. They will send out this fishing rod, and when the ideal prey comes along, they will open their huge mouth, and this sucking action sucks in their prey into their body. They aren't the best swimmers. As you can probably tell, they're not really built for speed. And instead, they don't have typical gill slits behind their eyes. Their gills are essentially under their armpits. And one way they can move around the reef is by gulping water, shooting the water out of their armpits, and essentially hopping around the reef. They can colour change. This image below is an image from an old colleague of mine that was doing coral bleaching work in the Maldives, an area of the world that has been struck by mass bleaching over several consecutive years. And this was the first account known to science of a frogfish camouflaging into a bleached coral. Typically, especially larger frogfish, they can move around, but if they're happy, they will likely to settle in a certain area. This particular guy had found a nice spot. Unfortunately, the coral bleached behind him and had the opportunity to either move on, but he took it and stuck where he was and made himself completely white, even adding on the algae to make himself very convincing. Size-wise, they can range dramatically, and the photo at the bottom there is some of our very, very newly born frogfish that are just a few millimeters long, to the giant frogfish in the main image that can reach maybe 30 to 40 centimeters in length. A few of the species that we get around this area, on the left-hand side there is the giant frogfish in the sponge. I don't know if you can see him, he's a brown color and kind of got his pectoral fins out to the side. The one next to him at the bottom is quite obviously the hairy frogfish. Then the bottom right, we have the clown or the warty frogfish, so-called either because of this warty skin-like texture or the clown face paint or the makeup that comes out from the eye. And then the last one in the top right-hand corner is the painted frogfish. And we can tell it's the painted because if you look on its its tail fin, there are 3 distinct spots sitting on that fin. If you see the spots, you generally know you've got a painted frogfish on your hands. Moving on to some cephalopods. So there are 4 different species of blue-ringed octopus. We get the greater blue-ringed here along the coast. One of my favorites. It took me well over 14 months of trying to be able to see one. It became a bit of a running joke in the dive shop that they would go out and they'd see blue rings quite easily. I would join them the next day and we didn't see any. This went on and on for quite a while. I was amazed at how tiny small they are, only a few inches long, but they are incredibly venomous. They do pack a punch. A bite from one of these guys is about 1,000 times worse than cyanide, and they have the ability to kill multiple people with the venom that they have in one individual. Saying that, they are known to be aggressive, but fortunately not towards humans. They are definitely an animal to give them their space, but they tend to just be aggressive to other octopus. So as long as you're not the octopus, you should be fine. Other popular octopus that we get in the area is the wonderpus. This guy has one of the best Latin names I've ever come across, Wonderpus photogenicus, and only described in 2006. So likely to have been around a lot longer than that, but separated from other species not too long ago. These guys we generally find at one of our more hardcore muck sites. By that means it's purely soft sediment, and we go along very, very slowly, looking for just the eyes sticking up out of the sediment. And one way we can categorize a wonderpus from other species is that its eyes are upon these 2 stalks, which is very different. As you look at the blue ring, the eyes are much more set into the main body cavity, whereas they're much more elongated on the wonderpus. Very similar to the wonderpus is the mimic. Again, identified quite late in 1998, but very subtle differences. Probably the best way to tell them apart from the wonderpus is if you look along the arms, where the tentacles start. For the mimic, there's a nice white borderline that run along the arms, whereas the wonderpus doesn't have that. They are named because of their abilities to mimic other animals. We had some guests had a video of one of these guys a little while ago now, swimming out on the reef. It seemed like something has spooked it. It shot down into the sediment, left 2 arms out, made them black, white, almost looking like it imitates a sea snake. Then our last cephalopod, the flamboyant cuttlefish, again very, very popular. The smallest of all the cuttlefish species, and one of the only ones that is known to predominantly walk around the reef. They can occasionally get up and off the reef, but they're generally walking around on the sediment. And this is thought to be because of their small size. They are very, very tiny, and all cuttlefish have a very porous and very light cuttle bone in their main body cavity. We used to use it a lot. The grandmas would put it in their budgie cages for the budgies to nibble on. And this bone is essentially their way of regulating their buoyancy. But because they are so small, their cuttle bone is then even smaller. They just don't have the oomph to get up and off the reef. We were lucky enough last Easter now to have flamboyant cuttlefish eggs on our house reef. So down around 20 meters, there was half a coconut shell. And within the body of that coconut shell, there were 20 to 30 very small grape-like sized eggs. We watched them over a period of 2 to 3 weeks go from opaque eggs to translucent eggs with very small but pure white flamboyance inside, to the last few days just before they hatched. As you can see in the image, they were perfect miniatures of the adult flamboyants. Very, very cool to see. And then lastly, before I take up too much time, I like to finish with something that doesn't get much airtime. They don't get talked about too much, are the sea cucumbers of the world. So sea cucumbers are echinoderms. They essentially mean they have spiny skin, although some species have lost the majority of this through evolution. But there are around 1,250 different species, and they can be found everywhere in the world's oceans, from shallow tropical lagoons all the way down to the deepest parts. I like to call them the vacuum cleaners of the ocean, as many species will go around the reef and the ocean floor and they will consume sediment. They will eat the sand essentially. They will clean off the detritus and the algae on the sand particles, and then they will poop out a nice long link of clean sand at the other end. So they're very useful to have around. Many of them do also breathe through their bums though. They run on a water vascular system, so they will take water in, they will filtrate the oxygen out of the water, and then the deoxygenated water comes straight out the way it went in the first place. They don't have many ways of being able to defend themselves. One of the best ways they can defend themselves in a situation is by manipulating the collagen in their muscle tissue. So what they could do is make themselves very floppy and fluid. They could wiggle into a crack or a crevice on the reef. They then manipulate that collagen again to make themselves very stiff. So if something came along that wanted to try and eat them, they would grab on and pull, and hopefully they wouldn't be able to pull them out of the crevice. The other way is by literally throwing up their insides. So on this image that's just popped up, these white long sticky tubules are known as Cuvarian tubules. And I can most strongly relate them to silly string. I don't know if you get that in America. It comes in a can and you squirt it and it's long and sticky and it goes everywhere. But these are essentially the part of the body that helps the cucumber take the oxygen out of the water. So this is very much a last resort. It throws these tubules out. It can't necessarily bring them back in again. So it's going to take them maybe a week to 10 days to regrow that. And then lastly, some of the cucumbers have this little friend. This is known as a parasitic pearlfish, a very long, very cylindrical fish. And in larger sea cucumbers, these little fish have found a niche in the animal kingdom that they have exploited to the best of their ability. What they will tend to do is find a sea cucumber host. They will wriggle inside the sea cucumber. Once they're in there, they have a very comfortable home. They are protected from predation. If they get hungry, they can start eating on the insides of the sea cucumber. So it's a parasitic relationship. Unfortunately, the sea cucumber doesn't come off too well from having a pearlfish inside it. And this opening needs to keep opening and closing, right, for the sea cucumber to keep breathing water in and out. So when it next opens, the sea pearlfish can go off on his daily errands and come back to his nice, comfortable home whenever he needs to. Okay, that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure there's some questions that I'll be happy to answer.
Hi, Kirsty. When you were on the cuttlefish page, we had somebody ask, what does SPP mean?
Oh, sorry, just species, just an abbreviation of species.
Thanks. And then we did have one, I talked to you about it a little bit earlier while Cheryl's helping get everybody ready. Just wanting to know, as far as all the efforts being made to upkeep and the well-being of Apo Island and Apo Reef, why do we see anchors on the reef so much? Why aren't there more moorings and things like that?
Yeah, so in the Philippines, it can be quite confusing. We have Apo Island, but we also have Apo Reef. Apo Reef is a much larger offshore reef system in the northern part of the Philippines. But here at Apo, there are moorings in place, which legally everybody should be using. There should never be anchors on the reef. Unfortunately, especially on incredibly busy days, there may well be a few people that are dropping anchors where they shouldn't be. But in more recent times, the last few months, there have started to be meetings with stakeholders, dive operators, etc., in the local area, looking at how we can regulate the numbers of divers and snorkelers and boats that are in and around Apo Island on any given day. It's only becoming more and more busy over the last few years and will continue to do so. So they are starting to explore how they can regulate that. Is it some sort of ticketing system to limit numbers, etc., which will hopefully then make sure that there are definitely no anchors dropped and only mooring buoys are used. So fingers crossed things develop in the future.
Awesome, thank you. And then Cheryl, are you gonna pop up here?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Kirsty. It was a brilliant presentation. I absolutely loved it. I'm someone that's personally, I don't know, whenever you dive with a marine biologist, I think it just enhances your dive experience so much. And I feel like you kind of took us away a little bit there to the Philippines, diving along with you with all these crazy, amazing critters. So thank you for that. Guys, we're going to open up the floor for questions. What you can do is either you can type your question in the chat box, but we will also open up the microphone so that you can talk to Kirsty directly, to avoid everyone kind of jumping in all in front of each other, and it also kind of bogs down the bandwidth a little bit. You can either raise your hand in the chat box area, or you could type something, or in the Q&A. Just let us know that you have a question for Kirsty, and we'll unmute you, and you can speak to her directly.
All right, I started with Dario. Sorry if I messed up your name, but I've unmuted you, so you just have to unmute on your end, and then I'll work on getting everybody unmuted that's got questions after that.
Hey, Kirsty, good to see you. Just a quick question. Do you have any issues with invasive species in the area?
Good question. Not that I am particularly aware of, and certainly not to the extent of lionfish across the Atlantic and Caribbean. Not something I've come up. I mean, one thing we have in our favor in this area is the sheer amount of biodiversity, the sheer amount of species. And so it's very difficult for one species, be it invasive or not, to kind of take over and be dominant. And so essentially could be more well equipped to deal with something like that versus over in the Caribbean with lionfish, etc. But not that I'm aware of.
Carrie, do you have, Carrie, are you there?
Yeah, I've unmuted Andy, Allison, and Natalie as well.
Okay, so Andy Brown, Allison, and Brian. You said Brian, did you unmute him as well? Or I'm sorry, whoever Carrie said she unmuted. If you guys are unmuted, so go ahead and ask your questions of Kirsty.
Do you guys see any hippocampus Denises there?
The yellow one?
Hippocampus Denise?
I'm not sure. Which common name do you use for Denise?
Denise pygmy seahorse.
We generally only get the Barganti, the one that we showed on the image. And we used to have a sea fan down on our house reef, literally at 30 meters, just on the borderline there for the Barganti. I haven't heard of us seeing any of the other species. Generally, it's more thorny seahorse, more estuary seahorse, etc. But you never know. They could just be outside the range of us scuba divers.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello,
Dave Wyatt, go ahead.
Okay, I was in the Philippines last year and I shot a video clip of a sea turtle fairly close, about 20, 30 seconds, and it was eating on a sponge.
Yeah.
Would that have been the green sea turtle or the hawksbill?
I mean, depending on where you are, green turtles in general in this area are a lot more abundant than hawksbills. So chances in those kinds of terms is it's probably going to be a green. All sea turtles generally have different prey that they most like to consume. In terms of green sea turtles love their seagrass, hawksbill turtles love their crustaceans, things with a hard shell, but they can also be very omnivorous. So they will take things like some sponges and different things, jellyfish, even if they're not a leatherback turtle. But in terms of what is most common that you're likely to see, I would probably put money on it being a green turtle.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, we have Andy Brown that is waiting to ask you a question. Andy, you're unmuted.
Great, thanks. Kirsty, I was just wondering what your favorite critter is and if you prefer pelagic diving or reef diving.
Good question. My favorite critter is probably the blue ring, purely for the amount of time it made me wait before I could see one. Haven't seen another one since, so who knows, it might be another 18 months before I see another one. But before I came here, I was very much looking and enjoying megafauna. So I love my sharks, I love shark diving, I love turtles and dolphins, etc. There's nothing better than being in the water with a shark coming at you and feeling that rush in your chest. But muck diving is a completely different way of viewing things. I find it holds my attention a lot more. When you're diving on a beautiful reef, it's more about taking in the amazing colors and all the fish. Whereas when you're muck diving, it's more of a treasure hunt. You're focused on what you're trying to look for, and it tends to hold my attention a bit more nowadays.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, Annette, I'm trying to unmute you. Annette Sewell has been asking, Carrie, did you try and unmute Annette, or it looks like maybe her microphone's not working?
She may not have one. She is allowed to talk, so if she unmutes from her side, but she may not be able to. But she was just asking if blue ribbon eels are common there.
Yeah, we do get ribbon eels. I wouldn't say they're overly common. If you wanted to see one, we've got a good few dive sites that we will go where we tend to know that they are. But ribbon eels are incredible in that they change sex and size and color all at the same time. So we generally see them when they're blue and yellow, but they can also be completely black when they get older. But they are around.
It's hooked up. But you're not sure how to unmute it. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, Annette's unmuted now.
Okay. All right. Annette, did that answer your question, or do you want to ask anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay. Natalie Lashmet, you're unmuted. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to know what your recommendations are for places to stay, dive shops to look into, and travel to the islands.
Well, obviously you should stay at Atmosphere. So in this area, so we're on the island of Negros, which is in the central Visayas, and we have Dumaguete, which is a kind of medium-sized city about half an hour away up the highway here, and Dauin is a very small and essentially sleepy town. This area of coastline has developed a lot in the last 10 to 15 years, excuse me, and will likely be developing a lot more in the next 10 to 15 years. There is a range of accommodations along this coast. Atmosphere is at the top end of that, and we're a very luxurious resort set in several acres with big sleeping gardens and lush planting and lots of things to help you relax on your holidays. But there's a range of accommodation for all kind of budgets and comfort levels developing along this area. And within the Philippines, and as a general, for quite a while, we've kind of been almost off the tourist trade, but that is growing a lot. And hopefully in the next few months, when these crazy times blow over, people will start coming back to us again.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, so Kirsty is actually with Atmosphere. So if you wanted to dive with Kirsty, she is a resident marine biologist at the resort. So you would be able to actually dive with her, and I'm sure that she would absolutely enhance your experience. That whole area for diving, I've been fortunate enough to be out there a couple of years, and it's absolutely incredible. But certainly being shown, I mean, there's so much of it. For those of you that have been muck diving, you know, my first time muck diving was absolutely crazy, and it's so easy to just go over everything and not even realize what you're missing. And when it's pointed out to you, it's absolutely incredible. I don't write a blog or anything like that, although I probably should now and again, just, you know, being a travel company. And I was inspired that my favorite piece of dive gear when I was out there was actually my magnifying glass. And, and right out there where Atmosphere is, I mean, even the house reef area and everything, I saw a whole community. It was like a couple, I can't remember the actual ratio, but it was a couple of tiny fish, shrimp, and crab, all living together in a symbiotic relationship, a total of 5 of them, and they fit in the size of a tablespoon. It was absolutely incredible. And so where Kirsty is, everything she's shown you today, Apo Island is not something you stay on. You stay at Atmosphere and you dive the house reef, you dive the local dive sites that are 5 to 10 minutes absolute max boat ride from where the resort is, and then you go out to Apo Island on a day trip, which is an incredible experience and a lot of fun.
It's definitely nice to have the mix. I mean, we get people that have never muck dived before in their life, and they're like, what on earth is this? So it's nice to have that along the coast, but also when you want to have those beautiful reefs and incredibly healthy in these times, over at Apo, you've got a nice areas you can flip between, get a nice mix.
Yeah, and then there's the town as well that's kind of cool with the market and everything else. So, I mean, some great experience. And then, as we said before, the spa atmosphere is absolutely incredible. You can do yoga and other activities and wellness. I mean, you can really just connect above and below the water. It's absolutely stunning. Alison, we'll try and unmute you again, but so that we can get started. Alison is asking, do you do any black water dives?
Allison is unmuted.
Okay, Alison, you're unmuted.
Yes, when I was visiting Atmosphere, I was trying to talk them into doing some blackwater dives, and they were considering it, but not very enthusiastically. And I was wondering if you're doing them yet.
At the moment, we don't, especially in the last few months. We haven't been doing much diving, unfortunately. But it is something that is obviously becoming more popular. We're being asked about it more. So it's something that we will be thinking very seriously about, and like the logistics of how we can offer it, make sure it's safe, and then for all involved. But it's, especially in Southeast Asia, it's becoming a lot more popular. So we're aware of the demand.
Does that answer your question, Alison?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Annette is asking, and I know some other people often ask this question. Kirsty, can you just explain what blackwater diving is to everyone?
So it's not something I've ever done before, but it's essentially going out at night, rather than doing a night dive and being on the reef, you're mid-water. So you can't see the bottom below you. Occasionally they will put lights out and hang the lights off the boat, and you attract everything. It's very good for photography. A lot of photographers like to sit out there and get all these incredibly different invertebrates and anything that can come up from the bottom and nocturnally get some incredible images of very, very weird and wonderful creatures. But it's not something I've tried. I'd be excited to try it and see what I can see.
Nice. Kirsty, I have a question. As far as, Philippines, weather, seasons, things like that, the best time to go. But from your standpoint, is there any sort of secret, special things going on that there's a special time to go?
It can vary. It kind of depends what you want to see. For divers, I mean, this time of year is great, which is why we're struggling quite a lot that we can't get in the water. We're not allowed to at the moment. But April, May, June is ideal for conditions. The weather is warm, the ocean is warming up. Probably, I haven't been in recently, but probably around 27, 28 degrees Celsius. We have 2 times of year in this area in terms of wind direction. It can vary a lot from essentially kind of October, November time, we have an onshore wind through to around about now, kind of April, May. So that it can get a little bit choppy, but now is the time of year where it's switching to offshore. So we are protected from the mountains behind us. So this morning when I walked into work at about 6:30, it was completely flat, like sea state 0. It was incredible. In terms of what you see underwater, we have what we call Octopus October. So a lot of our cephalopods are breeding October, November time. Again, that can vary. There's some variance in it. It might be due to lunar phases. So it could change by a few weeks each year. But that's when we see a lot of octopus mating. And then coming kind of February, March, we get all of our critters mating and having offspring. So we start to see juvenile frogfish, juvenile cuttlefish, etc. So boom critter time is probably April through to June.
Fantastic, thank you. We do have a couple more questions coming in. Bear with me for just a second. Andy, we're gonna go ahead and, Andy, you're unmuted.
Okay, I was just wondering if you guys do anything with turtle nests, or if there are nests on the island, or if there's any kind of research being done that, we as amateur scientists could go and observe? Anything like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in this area, we don't necessarily see many turtle nests. Occasionally on a few Facebook groups, you see nests popping up around the island, but very sporadically. Apo Island doesn't really have the beaches available for turtles to nest in. My particular opinion, if you remember, we mentioned the Turtle Islands Marine Park down near the border with Malaysia. That would be my main guess in terms of where the majority of our green turtles are coming from. And turtles will happily swim thousands of miles, but generally return to the same kind of area that they were born in to lay multiple nests over a nesting season. So I would say the majority of our green turtles head back down there when they reach maturity, which could be anywhere up into the late 20s, 30 years old.
Thank you.
No problem.
Kirsty, do you have, so we get a lot of interest in this kind of stuff. Do you have any citizen scientist opportunities in that area?
Yeah, so one of the ones that we've been pushing is the turtle identification. So any guests that have pictures predominantly of the left side of any turtle's face, be it a green or a hawksbill, or should anything else pass by, we are very grateful if our guests want to submit that to me. And they are welcome to come and help me, and I will essentially go through our catalogue of turtle images, and it takes quite a long time, but to sit there and compare the scutes or the makeup of the scales on the face one by one. If we don't find a match, then we add that to our database as another individual. And if it is a new turtle, the guests are welcome to name it, and we can send them through information. I know Lamave, the NGO that I was speaking about around Apo, they've been doing it for a few years now, and I believe they've got around 160 individual turtles that they've found over the last few years. But as I say, we want a lot of guests to provide us with the images, especially along the coast of Dauin, to see if the same individuals are coming back and forth.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, Andy said she's still working on a name for the one that she found with you.
Awesome.
And then Dario, you had your hand up. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, I was just, I wanted to hear Kirsty's opinion on when you think the island might reopen up again.
Who knows? We all know as much as each other. We can speculate, but at the minute, our particular island, so here on Negros Oriental, reports say that I believe we don't have any cases of the virus, so it's slowly being able to move around a bit more, although we're only allowed to go into the city on certain days of the week. But for us, it's if the Philippines opens up, we might get a bit more travel around within the Philippines, but it's really Manila and Cebu where the big international airports are. They seem to be the areas with the most cases of the virus within the Philippines. And I think the Filipino government are just very aware that they don't really have the infrastructure to deal with thousands and thousands of cases, like other areas in the Western world might have a much better medical system, whereas the Philippines just couldn't cope with it. So they're being very strict on people coming in and leaving. I was supposed to head home back to the UK in like 2 weeks' time, but my flight's just been cancelled. And at this point in time, I wouldn't be allowed to fly back into the Philippines. They wouldn't let me. So who knows, maybe June, maybe July, maybe a bit longer, but we're ready and waiting for guests to come back, and we really want to get back in the water and see what's changed.
Annette, did you want to ask about your picks?
Yeah, I was just curious if you wanted turtle picks from anywhere in the Philippines, not necessarily, near your island.
So we are focusing on the dive sites in the area that we as Atmosphere will go and dive. So around Apo, along Dauin's coast. But you can always go onto the Lamave website and look at their turtle monitoring program. And I'm sure they will appreciate images from around the Philippines to see if the turtles are traveling a bit further apart.
Okay.
Anyone else have any last minute questions? I think we're good, Cheryl.
Yeah, I think you answered them all. Thank you, Kirsty. We got you there for about a 20-minute run, so you hang in there. Well, I'm sure you kind of, if you're anything like me, I don't look at the chat boxes while I'm chatting because it can kind of distract me, but we had a lot of people there. We had a few people that have been and talked about how wonderful it is out there. We've got a lot of people just saying what a fantastic presentation this is and everything else. So they've really enjoyed it. And yeah, I mean, it was very, very cool. I learned a lot.
Good, I'm glad.
So Dave Wyatt, real quick, you've got your hand up. Did you, Carrie, I've got, like, for whatever reason, I'm not able to unmute people tonight. Could you unmute Dave real quick? I'm not sure, unless it's just accidentally up, but I think it's a fresh hand. Dave, you're on.
Okay, I got a quick question. While I was in the Philippines last year, I took a video clip of what somebody told me was a pygmy cuttlefish.
Okay.
Is there such a species as that? Because it's about 2 inches long. Is how big the one that I seen.
Potentially, one of the tricky things we have with a lot of them in the ocean is they usually have several different common names. So it's quite difficult to pin down what you say is what the picture might show. You're welcome to send it over to me and I'll have a look. But potentially, who knows? We do get a lot of very, very small little critters as well as cuttlefish. It could be a juvenile or something.
Yeah, that's what I was just wondering, if he was a juvenile versus an adult.
Yeah, we get even like broad club cuttlefish are very common, and they adult can be kind of 1/2 meter or so, but we do get juveniles that are literally maybe 1 centimeter long.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right. Well, everybody, we really appreciate you coming. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. My camera's not working either. We're just having little bugs today, but I am here, and we really appreciate it. We've seen a number of names that have been hanging out with us since our We Can Still Dream event a couple of weeks ago, and I truly appreciate it. It does feel like we built a family. But seen a number of new names as well this evening, which is fantastic. So welcome. Kirsty, I really appreciate your time today and your beautiful seminar. It was really great, and we'll get all the comments to you because everybody is sharing just how much it was a great presentation. They loved seeing all the critters, and just what a beautiful and interesting area atmosphere in the Philippines is that's waiting for them.
Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing as many of you as we can as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I hope you get out there real soon.